And I said, did you go to public school? She said, yeah. And I said, well, then I'm feeling very confident about my decision to homeschool because my kids will learn not to give unwarranted opinions in the checkout line at Walmart. Please. I was very pregnant, very hormonal, and totally tired. And
she was playing
oh
with
gosh,
fire.
she deserved it.
Welcome to the Homeschool Perspective, where seasoned homeschooling moms share tips, insights, and resources to empower your homeschool journey.
Hey there, welcome back to the Homeschool Perspective podcast. Today, we are tackling a question that many of us have faced. What do you say when people just do not get your decision to homeschool? It's a tough one. We're going to be sharing some memorable experiences that each of us have had when others don't quite agree with or understand what we're doing here. And we know this can be a really tough concept when you're facing it for the first time. And as we're going into the holidays, we just want to take some time, chat about it so that you feel confident going in and enjoying your time with people who may not quite get it yet. So with that being said, you guys ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So the first one is like a memorable experience. Like the first question we want to talk about is a memorable experience that you've had with somebody asking one of these questions. Between us, we have several decades of homeschooling experience in all different areas. So at first I couldn't think of any. And I think that's because I just have gotten to a place where those things don't stick in me anymore. But then I started to remember some goodies. So what about you guys? Do you still get this a lot, or has it shifted from, because when it first started happening, when I was first homeschooling, I don't know about you guys, but when it was first happening, my whole body would tense. I'd be upset for weeks. It would like be the thing that woke me up in the middle of the night. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I should have said this. And what about that? And now I literally can't remember most of them. So where are you guys at? Because we're kind of through that beginner phase.
I can remember one time really clearly, and it's not because of what the woman said or that it shocked me. It's because I'm still mildly embarrassed by my response, and I still feel a slight bit awful about it. And after that, I learned how to handle it, and now it never happens. I'm more likely to get the "do you know how that happens" question when I'm out with the whole family, because, 8 kids, than I am the "they should be in school." But one time this woman's like, they should be in school. We were in the checkout line at Walmart, and I had the kids in the cart, the buggy, because we were in Walmart in Alabama. So I guess they call it a buggy there. But they were all piled in there. And I also had my friends' kids. So we were quite a noticeable brood. Because I had like a dozen kids with me. Because she was off shopping somewhere. She's like, can they stay with you? I'm like, sure. And we're in the checkout line. And she just kept making comments like, why aren't they in school? And I said, well, we homeschool. And then one of the kids started crying because they pinched their finger. And she's like, well, if they were in school, they'd know how to stand there quietly. And she go there. And I was like, excuse me? And she's like, they should be socialized. And I said, did you go to public school? She said, yeah. And I said, well, then I'm feeling very confident about my decision to homeschool because my kids will learn not to give unwarranted opinions in the checkout line at Walmart. Please. I was very pregnant, very hormonal, and totally tired. And
she was playing with fire.
She deserved it.
Fire, yeah. That was a bold.
Rihanna looked around, like my oldest kind of like went like this, and she looked at the lady. She goes, "We don't make comments to that to pregnant ladies."
Wow.
Okay, really though, to be fair, that was a bold move to see a mom.
But it was my
a
first
mom with that many kids. No.
Right? But I remember it so clearly because I'm still to this day like, you could have handled that so much better. But on the flip side, I bet I saved other moms a lot of headache. You know what I mean?
Yeah, she learned that day. She learned.
After that, when other people are like, so your kids are homeschooled? And I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets really awkward, right? And then they're like and usually it stops there. Like I've learned that simple is so effective. And if someone goes, well, I'm not really a fan of homeschooling, I'm like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me.
Right. Yeah.
Like, what? And I'm like, well, your opinion's not going to change my decisions, but I appreciate that you felt comfortable enough to share it with me.
I think that hits the first nail on the head, though, is like when you leave the door open, when you come in, you're like, oh, yeah, well, we homeschool.
Let me give you all my reasons.
then people are like, oh, well, let me fix this for you. They're going to help you, right? Because they see you wavering. I think that, like what you said, just having a simple, clear response makes such a significant impact, because it's when you leave that door open and you're wavering, then those people that think that they're saving you from homeschool, which is an ignorant decision idea, we'll
Statement,
say,
yeah.
they're going to come in because, the whole, anybody who thinks it's appropriate to talk to others this way thinks that they're saving the day. So don't give them the room,
Right.
because if you come in and you're like, yep, we homeschool, we love it. Like, then it's,
And
With like
they're
close
gonna
friends
go.
and family. Like I think it's different with close friends and family than people
Of
out in the
course.
wild, right?
sure.
Yep.
But
Yep.
even, and I've been really blessed with my super tight circle being very supportive. I've never had anyone whose opinion actually matters to me come out against it.
Mhm.
But what I've learned to say, and I learned this from living in the South, because Southern women are like, my New York side is very confrontational. But after more than a decade in the South, I've learned to really kind of gentle it a bit.
Yep.
And I've learned to say, oh my goodness, thank you so much for sharing your opinion with me. And people are like,
That's it.
you're welcome. And I'm like, I'm so glad you love us enough to have a different opinion and support us anyway. And that's
Like that.
right. And then I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to argue with anybody. And if
Mhm.
it's not somebody I care about, I've learned to let their opinion roll right off my back, because I'm recognizing that they're a product of a system that I do consider to be broken. But it might have been what they needed, because there have been times where we've been a part of that broken system because it was the right thing for us in that season, right? And even homeschooling is not a perfect system. No system is, because it's filled with people and people are imperfect. But it's the best that they know, or they need to feel good about making a different decision for their kids than we're making. Like, we don't know their stories. So when they make those uncomfortable comments, for me, it's really helpful just to sit back, thank them for being honest, and then not engage, because otherwise I will get pulled in, and my heart and my brain and my stress levels don't need that.
Yeah. No one's nervous system needs this.
Well, I mean, and I think the key there is just to not be combative. You're just not coming. What I always like to do is like ascribe that positive intent. Like maybe they're just curious. And even if it's clear that they're not, I'm just going to be like, "Oh, you're curious about homeschooling. Well, let me tell you, how we do it, or I'll, and I'll share, because I know I'm not going to be moved." And it's like what you said with the Southern, like, you know, this is, oh, you're curious. Let me tell you, because you're curious about this. Not in any way inviting them to save the day and like change it and make things better for me. I'm approaching this like, you are curious about what we're doing, and so I'm going to tell you. And then the door is closed. One of my favorite things, because this doesn't happen where I live too much because there's so much homeschooling that happens in our area. And so we were in the grocery store last week and someone said, "Aren't you supposed to be in school?" And I was like, "Oh, they homeschool." And they're like, "Okay." And they just went along their merry way. So that's more of what we're like likely to get here. But I had a next door neighbor who was a retired English teacher, high school English teacher. And she did not like that we homeschooled right next door, and some other neighbors in our community, in our neighborhood. And one time she like cornered one of the girls, like the not in my family, and she cornered her in our like neighborhood pool, and she was like quizzing her like about yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No way.
Oh,
Can
I
we go
know.
back and quiz her students?
I
Because I've been a teacher in school.
Yeah, I
That's
know.
like,
But
it's
like
such
this
an
like
insane thing.
I know. This lady was different. She was
Mm-hmm.
she anyway, she got on my TikTok and started making comments on one of my videos and several of my videos. And it was just so funny to me because like I'm like, well, you know what? I'm not going to change her mind. This doesn't affect me. It's on her. This is on her. This is not on me. And so I just let it go. I might have commented back, but that's probably the funniest one that like I've had, just wild stuff. But what are you going to
Do you
do,
know that this This is the topic I get asked about the most from the people that buy our homeschool curriculum when I do like open Q&A sessions or say, hey, email me back with questions. I always get like, how do I explain to my mother-in-law, or what do I say to my sister at the Thanksgiving dinner table? Like, it's coming up so much right now with the holidays coming.
Yep.
How do I defend myself? And I always say you don't need to. But, of course, they come up with, well, how do you know they're learning enough?
Mhm.
How will they get into college? And then, of course, the ever popular, are you sure they're going to be socialized enough? Those are like the big questions that these people are
High
facing.
school.
Yeah, high school.
Yeah.
But
is
high
always in there.
school,
Yeah.
you'll put them in school. That's what my neighbor said to me. But you're
Mhm.
going to put them in for high school, I hope.
Yeah.
No?
Yes. I'm a little bit concerned that they won't have enough opportunities to try recreational. No. Anyway,
Yeah, right. Like, no.
they're going to miss
Not
out on
even
so
close.
many opportunities being homeschooled.
Yes, I know.
That's the point. Thank
That's the
you.
point.
No, but I was like, what do you guys say to that? Because I never did have those family members. The thought of having that come up at a holiday table for me brings out my feisty side, because it's like, I want to go to these people's family tables and be like, okay, well, their kid is clearly going to be socialized better because they're going to know how to be with all generations, because they're going to know how to be kind to their siblings. They're going to know how to help their neighbors because they're not stuck in a box 8 hours a day with only people at their age and level. Like, this is so obvious to me.
And they're also the most influential people in their lives are going to be their parents and their family. So it's, that's another. So I can be a little argumentative, maybe aggressive. I don't know, in the way when I'm passionate about something. And so in our family and for my husband's side of the family, homeschooling is like, what? Like, what? They don't know. That's like, that was a totally different animal, like straight A's, honor students, straight into school, you're either going to be an accountant, a doctor, there's like 3 paths, and that's, that's what you do.
And that's it.
That's it. That's it.
Okay.
I mean, you have a path, you have a system, you are the top of your class, you keep going, that's the way it works.
Well, to be fair, your homeschool
idea,
class makes that easier.
never pointed
Just
that one out.
saying.
That's good. Well, they're each at the top of their class then, right?
You just stack the deck in their favor. Done.
Here we go.
Valedictorian, baby.
But I think so I do have benefits in 2 areas, and one of them I think can help a lot of other people, but one is that I was homeschooled for the end of my homeschooling career. And so when people want to start talking about homeschooling, or especially if they want to be like, oh, those weird homeschooling kids, I'm like, oh, I'm one. And then they're like, you? And I'm like, yeah, a lot of us are like this, it's, that one kind of puts it to shame. And I got into every university I applied to. I, had scholarships, all of those things. So my firsthand experience helps in a way for that. The other side is that I have done a copious amount of research, and I have taught in schools and worked with homeschooling families. And so I can pull data out like you wouldn't believe. And most people who are concerned, it's because, but most people who are concerned, it's just like what Rachel was saying. They're curious. They don't really know what they're talking about. They have a couple taglines they've heard. I think in most cases, even if it is misguided and inappropriate, it is coming from this place of concern or even love. And so being able to directly throw out 1 or 2 lines of, well, actually, most universities are saving a segment of their enrollment for homeschooling students because they graduate more quickly and they're quicker to give back to their colleges, which translates to they make money faster, that they have lower divorce rates, that they have, like there's a couple quick factoids that I can pull out. And I think that's been helpful too. But my aunt, who I love so much, she and I are so close, and we are so different. And as I grew into an adult, we became more and more different, but we absolutely love and adore each other. And so there's things where she'll start to say something and be like, but I don't want to talk to you about that, because like we just are so different. She's known homeschool the whole time, but and that we love it and that it works for us and all of those things. And then the other day she surprised me, because she might even be listening to this, but she surprised me because she was like, but like high school, they'll go somewhere. And I was like, no. I'm like, actually, high school is the best time to homeschool. And
100%.
because they can really focus on what they're passionate about. We can key into what matters most so that they can get ready for that next level. But they can work into internships. They can really explore who they are so they're ready for the next step. That way, whatever they do next, they're going,
Mhm.
we're not going to be finding ourselves at $100,000 a year in university, right? So I think having a couple things in your back pocket for those key questions, like we know the data on socialization. Our
Mhm.
homeschooling kids are doing much better in the areas of mental health, behavioral health. Like our kids are healthier statistically, right? So just having one or two of those in my back pocket and in people's back pocket, I think it helps. If you have somebody who's being more aggressive and you're in close quarters with, it's not a stranger that you can southernly, politely navigate
Excuse
around.
yourself. Yeah.
Excuse yourself. Although Rachel had a great way to do that in close proximity too. You're gonna have to share. But
Yes, I will.
um, but I do think having a couple facts, like just knowing, actually, no, homeschool high schoolers are outperforming
Yeah.
public school kids. Or actually kids who are socialized via homeschooling have like significantly lower rates of mental health struggle. So I'm
Mhm.
good with what we're doing, right? Like just having one or two of those, if they're pushing you. I think, whenever we can approach it from like, nope, we're happy with our choice. We love it. Thanks so much. That's great. But there are times where people keep drilling in. And I do think it comes from, lack of understanding. But once you can throw out a stat or something like that, in most cases, that's shuts them down because they don't have that information. Because if they did, they're not likely to go after you. So that's
I,
another tool, I think.
Yeah.
as you're saying that, I'm thinking a lot of the people that have something to say grew up in a time when homeschooling was possibly not the best for everybody. There was a lot of fear-based homeschooling when I was a kid,
Mhm.
and there weren't as many resources, so it was much less tailored and specific as it is now. Like I can
That's what I was gonna
tailor my
talk about.
child's education, right? We do spark schooling because we have kids who like STEM and I'm not STEM gifted. Whereas, 30 years ago, if I were homeschooling then, I wouldn't have had resources like that. And if I weren't equipped to teach it, I wouldn't have been able to, like, my kids wouldn't have been able to learn it. But thanks to the advent of the internet and all of the homeschool resource companies out there and all of the amazing rights and privileges that we have, it's a different field. And so these people that are confronting us often don't realize how much is out there.
Yeah,
The
I know
only
that.
thing, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, though there were some really cool things even like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I remember when we went because I homeschooled at the end of my high school as well, which was a long time ago. Um, I'm like, oh, but we had classes via satellite that we did, and we were able to pull in the satellite distance learning, and there was so much cool stuff that we were able to do. I didn't find out until afterwards that even then I could have done dual enrollment and I could have graduated from high school with my associate's degree like some of my peers did. And so I think that it's just this like there were a lot of other opportunities out there and homeschoolers were taking it. I think that they were just quieter about it because it wasn't as popular as it is now and it wasn't as accepted. Mainstream is accepted. And obviously, we're having this discussion. It's not 100% mainstream accepted now, but it's better than it was. But I think highlighting those resources and telling people about the resources that are available now is a great way to start to break through some of those misconceptions that are out there because I think a lot of people still have the idea that homeschooling is, mom is like standing in front of a whiteboard and
Right.
like teaching like old school one room schoolhouse, like having that
Not
kind of a
drawing on the
view.
side of the house.
Not like shooting Nerf guns at the right math
Right.
answer, like
Yeah, oh, sorry.
okay, go ahead.
I
You've
have to
got something to
interject.
say.
Something's bugging me.
Okay, go.
Okay,
Go for it.
the data that we have, the stats that we have on the academic, the social emotional skills, the mental health, all of that, those aren't 10 years old. They're not 15 years old. They're not 20 years old. They are 30, 40 plus years old. So I think it's one thing that kind of irks me a little bit is that we say those kinds of things a lot. We say, well, no, it's different now. But it's not. Like, yes, we have more cool tools and resources, but the stats are the same. So even though they didn't have the bells and whistles and the like, although they did have those things, they just kept them quiet because homeschooling was made illegal overnight and they had to fight for 100 years to get it back. And as they did, money was lost and it became this whole like thing. However, when you look back from the moment it became legal, we have data like back to the 70s. And all of these things have been true that entire time, whether it was more socially accepted or not. So that's my only, I think sometimes that we excuse past homeschooling to like make people more comfortable. But this has actually been more effective the entire time.
I'm not arguing that it's more effective. I'm arguing, and I'll stand by this because I used to tutor homeschoolers.
Yeah.
Okay. That it wasn't as accessible. There was a lack of accessibility to the amazing resources. So the people who had access to them and the people whose families were able to fully embrace and step into this lifestyle and do what more of us are equipped to do today, they are the ones that give us those statistics and they're the ones that change the landscape. But the people that are naysaying us, I don't think they were exposed to those kinds of families.
Yeah, but
the families that I supported, like the ones that I tutored, they were lower income. And their parents were just trying to keep it together and do what was best for their kids because for whatever reason, their kids didn't flourish in a public schoolroom. But these, this was, heck, these kids were waiting with dial-up internet, right? Like it was like AOL, to get online. Like this was before all of that. And some of them were lonely. There weren't co-ops in their area. Their mom she had a teaching degree. But she only knew one way to teach, and she only had access to the curriculum that she had access to that her state allowed her to use. And it was different. And I think that I learned later when I moved to the South that there had been communities, even back then, like that family could have been a part of, but where we lived, there wasn't anything. And I have found that most of the ignorant people, because I truly believe it's ignorance, not willful disrespect, that ask these questions, they were from areas like that where it didn't exist, where it wasn't done well or not done at all. And so I think sometimes just sharing helps. You know what I mean? Like I get your statistics going back. I agree. Like the case is amazing for me. And some of my favorite humans are homeschooled humans. And I didn't even know it because they didn't look like homeschoolers. I was one of those people in my 30s, like 20, late 20s. I was like, oh man, you were homeschooled too? Wow, I would never have guessed, right? And then I realized you're homeschooling your kids and you're saying this, Lisa? Like, come on now. But in the area that I grew up with, you could tell who was homeschooled.
Yeah.
Because it was a fear-based choice a lot of the time, or a choice that they didn't have access to a lot of options. So I do think that there's that also that has to come into the conversation. When we're talking, like Rachel said, get curious and just assume that they're asking because they're curious. I almost wonder, like, what's your exposure to homeschooling? Why are you asking that? I wonder what we would get as answers, like.
If it's media based, it's like that's what they've heard or I have a friend. It's always like, oh, but my friend's cousin's neighbor was homeschooled and they were weird. And I was like, have you been in a public school classroom? There's always someone weird.
All
like,
kids
weird
are
is
weird.
a part of the human condition.
So someone told us that one time, they're like, and my friend's cousins, whatever, like, and they eat paste. And my dog's like, or my son was like, well, my dog homeschools and it licks its butt. And I was like, oh.
Fallacies coming into play.
But I love my child. It just sits there every day in math class and still does it. And I'm like, oh, please stop. Please stop.
That's so funny.
But, like our kids get funny too, because they get tired of the questions, they learn to get very creative.
Yep.
I want to hear that comment.
That's a whole nother set of things. Well, my daughter has my feistiness. And she is the sweetest, most polite, like to the point where when we were trick-or-treating last year, somebody went in their home and got her like a big bag of candy and brought it to her because they were like, she was the most polite child we've seen all night. Like she is such a sweet, 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 sweet kid. But boy, when you cross her line because she is like me and she will pull facts out from 30 years ago and she will school your butt right then and there. And she has on several occasions where it's like, excuse me, I don't think that you heard what you said. Like, and then proceeds to educate them.
Mm-hmm.
But she's polite first. She's polite first. She's always polite first. And she is a sweetheart. But ooh, you don't cross
Respectful.
Is your podcast asked?
don't cross an educated child, man.
That's right.
She's
Well, that
gonna pull
shows,
stuff out.
I mean, and that speaks to socialization of
One
homeschoolers.
One time she did this and the woman was dumbfounded. Like, I mean, just like gobsmacked, like jaw dropped. And I was like, sorry, we're still working on her socialization. And we walked away. I was like,
Oh, that's so funny.
she's terrified of adults. Doesn't know how to communicate with them.
Yeah. Yeah. My kids,
Yeah.
my kids will just talk to anybody too. Like it's
I know.
great.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that it's so funny when that topic comes up because I don't know a homeschool kid that isn't comfortable just talking to
Mhm.
anybody, you know? And so it's so funny that that's still such a go-to for people. Like, what about socialization? It's like, well, have you looked around? Because clearly, you know, I was homeschooled. I can,
And that is not a problem for you.
that is not a problem. I like to socialize. Socialization is one of my best skills. So I don't know.
And I was public schooled and I hate it. So, I mean, go figure.
Just because that, you know, the correlation doesn't equal causation, you know, but
Yeah.
it's funny that that's what is always what's always the go-to. But I would say, I mean, even though, Allie, I agree with you with what you were saying about like the data goes back years and years and years, it's still a little helpful thing to pull out just to be like, listen, there are so many resources out there that I can use, that I can pull from, that I can use to homeschool my child. And what's great about this is that I can personalize my child's education to
Mhm.
just be exactly what they need. And it's so easy for me to do that. And they can get done in 2 hours. And that's why you see us here at the, Walmart in the middle of the day in the buggies. And that's why we can do this is because they already got their work done. And, it just highlighting the positives, I think, with people and just letting them know how, they can work on things that they're interested in now because they have so much extra time. Yeah, we got reading, writing, arithmetic, all of that done, first thing this morning. And then they can build cut these intricate, things out of cardboard and build these sculptures, or whatever they're currently interested in. And I think that that is just helpful, especially with a family member too, that is, that's asking and truly probably curious, just highlighting all of those ways that you can personalize it for your kids is something that when I bring that up with people, they're like, they don't realize that they can be it can be personalized. They think that it is the same textbooks and stuff that the school is using. So cuz people ask me, they're like, "So do you go to the school and get the books and then that's what you use?" And I'm like, "No." Not at all. And or people that are new to homeschooling often go through that as well. They go to the whatever school they're pulling their kids out of, or they go shopping, for those same books because they want to stay on the same path and the same track as the school. Maybe they want to put them back in or whatever, at a later time. But it's like it kind of starts there. It's like it mirrors the traditional school, and then they're like, oh, there's all of these other, personal more. This might work better for this child. This might work better for this family or for this child or our family, how we learn. So I think, I don't know. I'm a big fan of just approaching it with assuming that they're just curious. I just assume they're curious. And then I talk to them about all the benefits and all the good things. And I just keep it positive. I'm like positive, 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 positive. And then like what you were saying, how I get out of the conversation, I'm like, I pull out my, living in the South for over 20 years and I've learned some things down here. And I'm just like, hey, I noticed that here I am talking your ear off and you haven't gotten any dessert yet. I'm going to get this for me. What do you want me to get for you? And then just go get your pie. and leave it at that.
You're dead on. And that's usually what I do. And I love the pie thing. I think if I did that here in California, I might terrify people, but
Hey.
it's
So there'd be like a fish taco, right? Isn't that like what
yeah,
y'all
there
eat
we go.
there?
Fish tacos are amazing, Lisa.
We
One
do
of these
love fish
days.
tacos. No, so good. Citrus slaw. You
I
got to
don't
have
eat
citrus slaw
fish.
on
No.
it. Okay, we'll get you a good taco. We'll figure
We'll
it out.
we'll work on you.
But no, I do think you are absolutely right. That is the approach. This is a personal bee in my bonnet, and not something that it would have to be a bad day for me to take this kind of level of conversation to somebody who is approaching me from the outside. It's just a personal bee in my bonnet, because I think a lot of the times that we get into trouble in these conversations is because we start to feel insecure. And
Exactly.
that's why I'm
Yes.
like, I really want to make sure that people know and understand on an intrinsic level, like deep, deep, deep down inside, that you know and understand why you've made this choice, what the benefit is, what the data says, so that these things don't dysregulate your nervous system to the point where they detract from this beautiful, amazing thing that you're doing, that your family is thriving from. But it's so hard. It's so hard when people are coming from places and they hit those levels of insecurity. And so that's why I think it's just a bee in my bonnet to be like, there's so much data, there's so much to back you up. And I think it's more, I want you as the homeschooling parent to have this inside of you, so that it's easier to let it be water off a duck's back. It's easier to come at it with love and curiosity, because I think it's harder to do that when it feels like an attack on something you're already feeling unsure of.
I know we have to close soon, Allie, but can you give
Yeah.
us like your 5 favorite facts to share with people that are new to homeschooling and why it's awesome?
Ooh, okay. Well, okay, I'll do this.
Please note, y'all,
Okay.
I said
That's
5, but we're going to count and see how many she can limit it to now.
I'm gonna try to. In my head. I'm like, it's like what are those brackets for basketball? I'm like, in my
Yeah.
head, it's brackets for basketball right now. I'm like, how do I narrow it down?
Or the first
Okay,
5
I'm
that
gonna
jump to mind.
Well,
There you
okay,
go.
I'm going to go with the most commonly asked questions, like the
Mm-hmm.
ones that you're going to get in these scenarios. The first one is always socialization. That's always like, it is just still top of the tongue. People have not figured this out yet. And so the best stats for that are there's a really great study that, if you guys are cool with, we can link in the show notes. I'll link a couple. I'll
Yeah,
send a couple
absolutely. Send
studies
it to me.
that are really great because they synthesize it. And my favorite part of these studies is they were done by the Peabody Journal of Education and the Education Research Institute, which are, wait, I'm saying that one, the second one wrong, but you'll see below. Both of them are not typically friendly to homeschoolers, and they're not friendly to homeschoolers, and they came up with this data. So I
Okay.
think that is helpful too. If you have somebody in education and they hear that the Peabody Journal of Education says this, it lowers their effective
Legit.
filter and makes it a little easier for them to accept. But like with socialization, the mental health crisis we're experiencing in the world right now with young people is very real. It's very tangible. Everybody is touched by it in some way at this point in the world, unfortunately. And children who have been homeschooled I'm going to I don't want to get the number wrong, but it is significantly less likely that a child who's been homeschooled is going to experience mental health struggles or struggles with behavioral health or relationships. And that includes divorce rates. The rates of these issues are significantly lower in the homeschooled population. And I think right now, these are concerns that people have. So saying like, yeah, totally get that. But did you know that
Mm-hmm.
homeschoolers are less likely to be struggling with depression, anxiety, feeling lonely, those things. So we'll link that study, but I think that's one of the big ones with socialization. And then having a funny anecdote, honestly, about how your kids never stop talking and like can, order for themselves at a restaurant, and that's part of your curriculum. That's always helpful. The second one, high school, always comes up. I think high school is a really common one. People,
Mhm.
because we have this idea, you can go back and look at when this started, early 2000s, but there's laws and things that back it. But when we shifted the goal of high school to be getting into a college
Mm-hmm.
and created these pathways from your freshman year to your state universities, which they created this very clear system, we shifted our idea of what high school was. And it started becoming very test driven or test focused, must have AP, must have honors, must have these prescribed and pre-approved things. And so it is a genuine area of concern for people. They look at it and they're like, but you have to do these things in high school. Now that's a whole nother conversation, and I wouldn't broach it on a surface level with people, but something that helps with people who have those concerns is to know that the Ivy League universities save a percentage of their enrollment for homeschooled kids. And that there's a really great study, or not study, every year the collection of college admissions advisors, they have a journal and they put out a state of their job paper every year. Increasingly over the course of time, they have talked about going after homeschool students because they have been so successful for their universities. Mm-hmm. So Ivy League universities are actually actively seeking out and setting aside enrollment for homeschoolers. That is one that people are like, oh, and that waylays a lot of their fears. So we'll make sure to link that study as well. I think that's a really helpful one. And then the last one I would say that people are most concerned about is, how do you know they're learning? What do you know to teach? Like, how do you know what to teach them? What if you don't know how to do that? And the two stats for that one that are the absolute best, although they're kind of linked, is that homeschoolers have outperformed on standardized testing significantly. So like they have typically done over 40 percentage points better than both public and private school students on standardized testing. Mm-hmm. And this has been over 40, almost 50 years at this point. They've consistently done that. But the best part of that stat is that is regardless of their parents' education level. So when you look at public and private schools, they will link a parent's education level to their child's academic success. So you'll see a correlation between, and there's tons of papers on this, but you'll see a correlation between a parent's education level and their child's academic level in both public and private schools. And so you'll see lots of programs and grants going after kids who have parents who have lower education levels. But in the homeschooling world, in all these decades of data, we have found that the parents' education level has no impact on how much they perform, and they perform above statistically across the board. So that shuts down those fears, because it's because of the nature of homeschooling, because of the one-on-one, the way we adapt to our kids, the fact that there has to be mastery-based learning in homeschooling.
And just the fact that you love your kids, and what parent doesn't want their kids to be successful? If you have chosen homeschooling, you're in it, so yeah.
Well, I was even thinking like today, one of my kids did something on their own, and they came, they're like, hey, I just graded my paper and I got like an 80 on it. And they're like, should I move to the next thing? I'm like, hey, no, let's dive in and like check this out. And we redid it, and we'll go back and review. So mastery based is a thing that I think people don't get. They're like, okay, all homeschool kids get A's. Well, no, all homeschool kids don't. But yes, many of them do, because we don't move forward until our kids have mastered a topic. It's funny. I was thinking, my kids have finished their textbooks every year. I don't think that that's a requirement, but we've always finished something, because I want to teach my kids to finish what they start. And I have this nasty habit that I developed in school, of all places, of reading books for the highlights, like nonfiction books for the highlights, like picking through and getting, and then moving on to the next thing. And I realized that I learned that in high school and college because of the quantity that I had to read. And so I missed some of the really good things, and I wanted to teach my kids differently, to really devour, to complete, and then to move forward. So when we talk about this mastery-based thing, it is really real. And it's something that doesn't often come up because people don't know to ask about it, right? Like, how do you homeschool your kids?
Some parents don't realize they even do
your philosophy, right? It's just not even on their radar as a thing. And so that is something that I've brought up for people that go deeper in conversation with me when they say, like, what's one of your favorite things? And I was like, aside that I get to figure out how they learn and teach them how to learn and tailor it, especially in the early years when you're laying that foundation. But but also just teaching them to finish and then move on, and how to process and master something and take the time to do that and not feel rushed to move to the next thing.
Right.
It's very, very powerful.
I
And
have
then
to tell you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
one statistic that you didn't mention that I love is that a student's relationship with their teacher and their educational experience in kindergarten affects their academic success all the way up through 8th grade. What better place for them to do kindergarten than with me? Because they're going to have a great relationship with me, and I'm going to make sure they have a great experience, right? Like, this is one of my favorite statistics from my heart, like for me personally, not sharing, but I love that, like, the first 2 years that we homeschool together, because all it is that relationship and falling in love with learning. And I'm guaranteeing their success and performance in school all the way up through 8th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And along those
How
same
cool is that?
lines, if you went to a traditional school, who was your favorite teacher? And then like who did you learn the most from? And like is it the same teacher? And why? Because you had a connection with them. So you don't learn from people you feel disconnected from. Like, who is your least favorite student or teacher? Don't answer the student one. Who is your least favorite teacher? And why did you not like them? Oh, they didn't like me. Okay, so obviously there wasn't, or they had something against me. I don't know what it was. Like that's what
Mm-hmm.
people say. And you had no connection with that teacher, right? Did you learn anything in that class? Most often, no. And if you're going to say yes, there was something that turned it around and now they're your favorite teacher. You know what I mean? There was some moment of connection. So you don't learn from people that you're not connected to. Where are you most likely to find a teacher that you are going to be like super connected to? I mean, it's silly, but
Cool.
but I think that's a valid place or a way to bring that up to people, because if they're asking about homeschooling, chances are they were not homeschooled growing up, which mean they went to traditional school. And so
Yeah.
by relating it back to their own experience will help to solidify those points that you're making, even the research backed ones, but solidify it by making it personal to them. And then I started laughing, Lisa, when you were talking about the mastery thing, because, and you said something about like, typically we don't give grades to our homeschool kids, or you said something like that. Okay. So this just happened yesterday, and this is why it made me laugh. But one of my kids was struggling with this, something he learned wrong in math. And like most of the time he is like teaching himself math, and I just come over his shoulder to make sure he did it right. Well, he didn't. He learned something totally wrong, and it's stuck in his brain now wrong. And so he got so frustrated that he learned, it was an algorithm thing. He just did the wrong step. He did it the wrong way. So now he has to unlearn it. And I was like, well, maybe we'll just take a break from your math book and we'll just focus on this one thing and we'll just work through it and learn it. Well, he didn't like that idea because he likes to keep progressing. Well, so last night he goes, Mom, what grade would you give me in math right now? And I was like, I think I'd give you a B. And he's like, and he goes, well, I've already started to figure out what I was doing wrong and how I could fix it. So would that change my grade? I'm like, oh yeah, when you figure that out, you'll be back up to an A. And he's like, oh good, because I've already figured it out and I think I'm gonna do it the right way now. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, then you're gonna be getting an A very soon. But it was so funny because he doesn't know anything. I don't give him grades. I've never given him a grade before, but he knows it from his friends, and he knows it from other places and TV and stuff like that. So he's very motivated by grades, even though he has no experience with them. But it's that level of mastery, and it's that, getting to that mastery, and he knows intrinsically that he can't move on until he masters this, and he's not going to be settled with, he's not going to be feel good about, not figuring that out and struggling with it. So he knows that he needs to master it before he moves on. So I thought that was a funny little tie
That's awesome.
there.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Well, and it's such a great way to learn grit too, and just how to push through and do hard things. You guys, this has been such a wonderful conversation. And at the end of the day, you can't beat the student to teacher ratio, right?
Exactly.
In most families, I should probably say. But thank you so much for joining us today. This has been such a fun conversation. If you are going into your holiday season and you know that there's some people that might have some feelings, I hope that this has been helpful and encouraging to you. Just remember, at the end of the day, you know what's right for your family. And homeschooling is a beautiful choice when it's something that your family can commit to and enjoy. So we would love to hear some of your stories, though, because these were just so
Yes.
fun. So
Yes.
make sure that you head to our socials and share your best stories and lines. We can't wait. I'm sure there's more buggy stories in there. So please share those with us. You can check out the data that we're going to put in the show notes below. And we will be so excited to see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.